Hello, everybody. This is Mike here, and you're listening to the All Metal Mode podcast. Guess who's back? It's been a while, hasn't it? It's been a bit, but I'm happy to be back tonight supporting Mr. Dorian. Dennis couldn't join us tonight. He is on the road picking up his brand new, what is it? What's that called? Dorian,
Uh,
mobile,
well,
or,
he's picking up a gooseneck trailer. It's
yeah.
it's a travel trailer.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm filling in and taking over the show and running it. I'm going to apologize right now. I am exhausted. I didn't sleep last night, none, and I've had a busy day. Um, just been going and going all day. Went metal detecting for a while, and I just had to keep going. And I sit down and I told Dorian, "Oh boy, it's starting to hit me now." So I'm feeling it now. But yeah, I'm glad to be here with you guys. I've missed it. I've missed I'm just like a regular old listener, except I don't even listen in live. I listen to the show when I'm driving and stuff. And that last one, I haven't even told Dorian this, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw this out there. Maybe I did tell him. The last one I listened to was Dennis in the background making all the noise, and Dorian getting so distracted. And then Dorian, when you said, okay, listen, everybody, hold on one second. Let me holler for Dennis. Dennis! Dennis! I lost it. I was in tears laughing so hard. And at listening to that episode, and in my mind, I'm just like, if this was live, I would be calling Dennis up like, "What are you doing? It sounds like you're dropping marbles on a table." But
Oh, I'll
oh,
tell
it
you,
was
Mike.
so, and you just kept going at it like a trooper trying to work through it, and I
Oh,
could tell how frustrated you were getting.
imagine
Oh goodness.
imagine a big empty boiler tank, and you're inside, and there's about four guys with sledgehammers beating on the sides of it.
Right, and you were trying to talk through all that. It was horrible.
Yeah, yeah. It got so loud in my ears, I could not hear the words coming out of my mouth.
Oh, yeah, that's horrible. Another thing, everybody, I'm going to be in and out. I put a brisket on the smoker earlier, and it so should have been done. It's not done. I thought I had plenty of time to finish it up, and it's still not on. So I'll be tuning in, checking everything out. But I'll only be gone for a minute or two each time. I'll be here, but just giving everybody a heads up, and we'll do that. And before we get started, before I turn it over to our amazing and awesome storyteller and host, check out Texahoma Metal Detectors. David Finley's an awesome guy. I've really got to get to talk to him over the last few months, and I really like David. Good guy, great deals. Give him a call. I'll tell you, Dorian, I am so tired of not being able to call people when I want to buy something, or I'm interested in something. And something I love about David is he's the type of guy, pick up the phone, give me a call, and if you're that type of person, pick up the phone. He'll help you out, walk you through it. He's a great guy, and absolutely multi-line dealer. I think he sells everything you'd want and more. But let's get started. I'm turning the show over to Dorian, and I'm going to tune in and listen.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Greetings, everybody. Hello to our historical militia. I want to, because of the interest in my just ended Facebook suspension, and to prevent stories from getting out of hand and rumors flying crazy, I want to explain to you what happened, and why that I feel obligated to resist what was done to me by moving to another site, which is much more user friendly and does not use spyware, doesn't have ads, doesn't use manipulative algorithms to try to get you to buy things and so on, like Facebook does. But I've been concerned about those things for some time, but this was really over the top. We had a thread going on in my Civil War group called We Dig the Civil War Headquarters. And just a week or so ago, Mike and I and three of our members that are from Elizabethtown, Kentucky, they have a group called the Dirt Nerds, and that is Bill Curd and Brian Cerniglia and Larry Simmons. And we all hunted together. It was a great mix. We're eager to get back together and do some more hunting together. These guys are great guys, and it was just really a wonderful experience. So we're having a thread talking about some of that stuff on my group. And I commented, Bill Curd was the absolute champion among the five of us for digging iron off the old house sites we were hunting. And so I jokingly nicknamed him the Ironmonger. Now, for those of you that don't know, monger is an old word. It goes way back into the 1700s, if not earlier. And a monger was someone who made a product or worked in a particular field, like an ironmonger made products out of iron and sold them. Woodmonger made products, like wood carvings, for example, out of wood and sold them. There is nothing derogatory or insulting about the word monger. It is a totally innocent word. So I said in the post, I said, well, Brian had looked at a Civil War photo I posted, and I've really been encouraging our members to become much more astute at catching small details in these pictures, because if they learn to do that, it will transfer into their relic hunting. They will go on campsites and battlefields, and they will catch details about where they ought to be hunting or should be hunting and things like that. It will carry over. If you get used to finding and seeing the small details that 90% or more of the people miss, it can be a really great skill to add to your metal detecting experiences. So Brian had done really well in this photo, and so what I said was, since I've hung the moniker, and a moniker means nickname. Since I hung the moniker of Ironmonger on Bill, we're going to have to call you Hawkeye, because you're catching all these details in these pictures. And the comment got deleted. I got suspended for 24 hours, and Facebook told me that I was inciting violence offline with that comment. Now, I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but if anyone can show me how I was inciting violence with that comment, I'd sure like to know. I'm just teasing two of my buddies a little bit. It's totally friendly. There was nothing hostile. Nobody was insulted. No race was demeaned. Nothing. And here's the problem. This is my second offense. The first one, I just bit my tongue, so to speak, and I did not respond to Facebook. This time I defended myself. They did not reply to me. And the problem is, if they decide another one of my innocent posts doesn't meet with their community standards, I'll get a 30-day suspension and I'll be locked out of my group for 30 days, or they may just delete the group entirely. I'm not going to give them that power. They pushed me back against a wall, and I'm coming out fighting, folks. I just want you to know that. I'm moving my group and my personal page to a site called MeWe. Checked it out. These people, it's made up of millions of people that left Facebook, and it is anti-spyware. Like I said, it's anti-algorithms. They just they leave you alone, and you're not going to get bashed for an innocent comment over there. So I feel like it's a much healthier environment. And if the group, if some people don't want to come with me, well, that's fine. We'll have less people in the group, and we'll start rebuilding from there. but I'm not going to give Facebook the power to shut me down and accuse me falsely of things that I am not guilty of. I'll own up to what I'm guilty of, but I'm not going to be treated like that. I think there comes a point when a person has to draw a line in the sand and say, no more, no further. And so that's what's happened, and that's the true story. Now, let's get to the fun stuff. Let's get into the incredible story of Jonathan Swift and his treasure mines. Last week, we'd gotten into his journal. I don't want to review the whole program. For those of you who might be coming into the middle of the movie, so to speak, you haven't heard the last part, then I just tell you, you'll have to go back and listen to it. We're going to pretty much pick up where we left off. A little tiny bit of review. Remember, Jonh Swift was born in Philadelphia in 1712. He eventually went to sea, became captain of a ship, married a lady named Desiree Ann Swift in 1748, and he left the sea in 752 and settled in Alexandria, Virginia, became a trader amongst the Cherokee in North Carolina and Tennessee, and he ended up on the Yadkin River down in North Carolina, the same area where Daniel Boone came from when he came into Kentucky. He tells us he went with General Braddock in the attack on Fort Duquesne at the forks of the Ohio River. That is now Pittsburgh, and it became Fort Pitt after the English got it from the French. But in this particular attack, the English were defeated, but they captured some prisoners, and one of them was a man named George Mundy. I'm moving kind of fast on this because I'm trying to catch up to where we were. Mundy said he'd been born around 1735 somewhere in the Great Lakes region. Mundy and his father and brothers had gone on a long hunt for furs and minerals south of the Ohio River. About 1756, they found a vein of silver, were working it when the Shawnee Indians attacked, killed his father and brothers, and they took Mundy a prisoner. And this was somewhere on the headwaters of Big Sandy Creek. Now I'm summarizing out of Swift's journal, and I'm going to read it verbatim as soon as we get right back to where I had to stop the program because of the strange noise that we couldn't find the source of until after we had to close the program. Anyway, Mundy had to travel great distances with the Indians as they were a nomadic tribe, and he was forced to help mine silver in several places. And Swift mentions the Indians had learned the value of silver from the French years before, and that is a true statement. I have other stories about other silver mining that does verify that. After about 3 years, Mundy managed to escape, make his way back to his people around the Great Lakes. He was at Fort Duquesne when he was captured in 1755, serving as a trapper and a soldier. And Swift tells us that because he had befriended Mundy and that he had no family, Mundy said he would guide me to the Indian silver mines. And this was in 1759. Now, the dates start becoming more important as we go along, so you want to pay more attention to these dates from here on out. I held up the trip until I could sail to Cuba to enlist the help of two experienced miners of my acquaintances, names of Gies and Jeffries. I provided for Mundy's welfare while I was gone. On my return from Cuba, I contacted several friends in North Carolina and Virginia that had been with me in the Braddock campaign: James Ireland, Abram Flint, Samuel Blackburn, Shadrach Jefferson, Isaac Campbell. Led by Mundy, we penetrated the western country, as this area was called then, and they left Alexandria on June 21st, 1760. After crossing Big Sandy Creek, which is now the Big Sandy River, I don't know, I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly where the Big Sandy begins. I know it flows through Grayson, Kentucky, and goes to Greenup, Kentucky, where it flows into the Ohio River. There was quite a Civil War story about a division that retreated along the Big Sandy River during the Civil War. Okay, so after crossing Big Sandy Creek near its headwaters, and that's where the creeks would come together to form it into a river, and continuing west for a considerable distance, we located three of the mines. We located the other mines by traveling along a great ridge. Some people think this is Pine Mountain. We located the other mines by traveling along a great ridge, leading in a southwesterly direction until we came to a large river, the name of which was unknown to us, thence north to a large and very rocky creek, and thence, that is, from there to the mines. Okay, now we're in new territory here. I have not covered this yet. So we're going to keep on in Swift's journal. We have to go through the journal, and then there's a whole lot more that we'll be getting into, including maps and things. I don't remember how far we went in the pictures. I think to about, let's see, I think somewhere around picture number 4. We didn't get very far. So I think we'll be picking it up in picture number 5 here. And let's see, we don't need to go there right now. We're using the same pictures that I posted last week since they didn't get used. And, this has been kind of tough with this 24-hour suspension. I haven't been able to do anything on Facebook or posting anything and so on. So I'm going with what we have, and I think it'll be more than enough with all of the incredible information Swift put in his journal. And I want to point out something to any of you want to be professional treasure hunters and you want to hit the big time and you want to find a big treasure like a Jonh Swift treasure. I want to point out something to you as we go through this journal. I want you to see how much he wrote and how much detail he put into it. It is not the kind of thing that a person is going to do and just simply fill it full of error and lies. It just doesn't serve any purpose. This is an actual journal that Swift expected to keep in his possession, and that these notes would be helpful to anyone he designated to, mine the silver that he would find and mine. Now let me get my notes back up here. Okay. Swift says, okay, they got to the mines. And by the way, he says there were 3 mines in the first group. And there were 6 in the second, although we'll find that out later, but I want you to know right now, we're talking about a group of 6 mines. And he says, we built a furnace and we burned charcoal. And that doesn't mean they actually burn charcoal like you put charcoal in your grill to cook a steak and you burn it. It means they made charcoal. You have to burn wood to make charcoal. A common way was to dig a pit and, to put layers of wood and wet leaves and so on. And there's a whole process. And it's been a while since I've read all about that, so I'm not going to try to explain all of it to you. But the point is they made charcoal so they could smelt the ore that was in these mines. We built a furnace and burned charcoal west of the headwaters of Big Sandy Creek. And they actually built more than one before all of their mining experience was over. You understand, this is the first one they built. They built a furnace, which we would call a smelter. Okay. And all the smelters will be found along creeks because they had to be near a water source. Now, I have a note here that the Big Sandy River runs on the border between Kentucky and West Virginia. So he says they did this in preparation of our mining venture the following year. So this was more of an exploration mission to locate the mines, to get charcoal ready for smelting, and to come back the following year and really begin the operation. So this was quite a Big operation. You can see they carefully considered and thoroughly prepared. They made preparations. Okay, continuing on, he says, we then returned to Alexandria, arriving December the 10th, 1760. And then he says, in early 1761, our company, he has that in quotes, consisted of 17 men: Joshua McClintock, Henry Hewitt, John Watts, Jeremiah Bates, Alexander Bartell, William Wilton, Moses Fletcher, Samuel Blackburn, James Ireland, Harmon Staley, the two Frenchmen, Pierre Saint Martin, and Andrew Renaud, that's spelled Renaud, and I think it's pronounced Renaud, who were friends of Monday, the two miners, Geese and Jeffries, and Seth Montgomery, who had worked at the Royal Mint in London and was an expert in making dies and molds for the coinage of silver crowns. Think of the silver crown as the English equivalent of our silver dollar, or the Spanish pillar dollar. So they contained about an ounce of silver. And then he goes on to finish listing the people. He says, myself and several Shawnees, plus several men to help with the mining and pack animals. Montgomery and I were partners, owning several ships in trade on the Spanish seas. Now that gives you some clues if you're able to be alert enough to catch them. Myself and several Shawnees. That's interesting that they had Shawnees with them. You wonder why these Shawnees would be helping the white men, or how they could trust them. But he does not elaborate on that. So they had quite a group here. And it says plus several men to help with the mining and the pack animals, because it doesn't do any good to mine silver if you can't get it, to where it can be used. And this area that they found the silver in was very remote, and even with the roads that go back in there today, some parts of the Swift country are still very, very remote. And they are a challenge for even younger men to get back into and get out. Sometimes you go down into very deep canyons. Sometimes you climb very high and steep mountains. Done all of that in this area. And I'll be talking more about that as we get farther into the series. But did you notice Montgomery, this is the guy who had worked at the Royal Mint. Montgomery and I were partners, owning several ships in trade on the Spanish seas. Now that sounds, innocent enough, but the giveaway is what he says, the Spanish seas. Now there is no Spanish sea. So what are the Spanish seas? They are the areas of the ocean that were controlled by the Spaniards, the Spanish Navy, with their fleet. Now, the Spanish were at war with the English, and so British ships, trade ships on the Spanish seas, controlled seas, well, that'd be pretty risky. Pretty risky business. They'd be risking getting boarded and sunk by the Spanish ships of the line, the big ones, the galleons. So these ships in trade were very likely well-armed privateer ships, very fast ships that could run circles around a big, heavy galleon and that they could move in quickly, fire a broadside, and get out of range really quickly before a lot of damage could be done to them by all the guns that the big galleons carried. Okay, after our trip in 1760, Mundy decided to wait on the upper Yadkin River in North Carolina, where I owned land, while I remained in Alexandria and organized a company of men I knew I could trust that were interested in silver mining and could be sworn to secrecy. The company was made up of traders and hunters, all experienced frontiersmen. We obtained our supplies at Alexandria and made ready for our trip into the wilderness. It took a considerable time to accomplish our preparations. But by June 1761, we were ready. We planned to use trails known to Mundy, the two Frenchmen, and our friendly Indians. Now, folks, one of the things I was telling Mike before the show, and I want to mention to you again, the Jonh Swift silver mines and related treasures are one of the absolute giant biggest treasure stories in the United States and has been for over 200 years. This is a biggie. This is not a small subject that we are tackling. This is so worthy of our attention. And you'll see as the story develops just how amazing it truly is. So Swift says, I determined to keep a record of our trips and mining activities in the Western country. So this is why we have this journal. We started for the mines on the 25th of June, 1761, from Alexandria, Virginia, and came to Leesburg, and from there to Winchester, and from there to Little's. There was a place called Little's Fort. It was not a big place at all, kind of a fortified trading post type thing. And thence to Fort Pitt, that is Pittsburgh, where we were joined by the two Frenchmen and several Shawnee Indians. Now, this is 1761, and at that early date, not all the Shawnees were yet in an all-out war with the white men. That would come in another, 20 years. It would begin to really, really get going. There would be isolated incidents, but it would be about 1780, where things, the 1780s were the worst time of the Indian Wars, as we've talked about. So since the Shawnees were mining silver at this time, it is highly likely the Swift's group of friendly Indians had at least one tribal spy among them. I can't believe that there wasn't at least one that was reporting back to the Shawnees about Swift's progress. All right, getting back into the journal now. We obtained supplies and proceeded to the headwaters of Great Wheeling Creek, and from there to the Little Kanawha, and from there to the Great Kanawha. Well, I grew up around the Kanawha River. I grew up on Coal River, which flows into the Kanawha River at St. Albans, West Virginia. And back in the time of the Civil War, that was called Coal's Mouth. And they actually had a bit of a Civil War battle right there. But that's another subject. I have been from Charleston to the Ohio River on the Kanawha River on a boat on a Boy Scout trip. It was a great adventure for me. Loved it. So they were somewhere at this point near Charleston, West Virginia, and then they went to the Guyandotte River. Now, if you drive from Huntington, West Virginia to Charleston on Interstate 64, is it? I believe it's 64. you will cross, a concrete bridge over the Guyandotte River. And when you cross that bridge, my uncle built that bridge. So there you go, a little bit of personal history thrown into the mix here. So they went to the Guyandotte River, east side of Huntington, West Virginia, which is where it is. And then from there, they went to one of the forks of Great Sandy Creek, as he calls it. And this would have been the Big Sandy River again on the Kentucky-West Virginia border. The fork referred to is most likely the Tug Fork that's located along Kentucky's eastern border. And it's a little north of where Kentucky joins West Virginia and Virginia. Okay, so thence to the forks of the Great Sandy Creek near its headwaters. We had two workings. Okay, in other words, two specific areas where they had mines, and they were widely separated by distance that well, they were widely separated by a great distance. They were not close together, the two groups of mines. So Swift says the company was divided into two parties. One group went due west for a considerable distance, and this is the group that went to the richest mines. And I have calculated that this is about 135 to 150 miles to an area that is between today McKee and Irvine, Kentucky. It was in this area that yours truly here found three of Swift's mines, and actually, I think I found a fourth one out of the six. Two of them have still eluded me, but I've worked on this treasure for 30 years, and breakthroughs have come one at a time on it. I'm going to tell you all the breakthroughs and all the things that we found, but they didn't all happen in a single day. But every trip I took down there and found another piece of the puzzle, so to speak, it made for a great trip home. I went home happy, even though we hadn't brought home any treasure, knowing that every clue that we discovered that's given in Swift's journal brought us closer. And Swift's clues were very, very good. And once you understood the area he was talking about, and he tells you how the landmarks and signs and things relate to each other, we found that to be exactly the case. So the other group went southwest along the Great Ridge, and I think that's Pine Mountain, each party to work the location selected the previous year. So this grouping was called the lower mines, and it's not the one I searched for and found. So all I can really comment here is that the clue Swift gives would indicate to me that these mines were somewhere in the general vicinity of what is now Livingston, Kentucky. If you want to, anybody down that area wants to work on those, I can't help you a lot on those because I focused so entirely on the other group, which was his six richest mines. He says, my party had 4 places, that is mines, where we obtained silver that were later connected by trails or tomahawk paths. Swift went with the party, by the way, that went due west to what he later calls the upper mines and the richest mines. Those are the two terms he refers to them. And he said the ore was more pure in these than it was in the lower mines. And the silver we're talking about, folks, the silver which the geologists officially deny exists in Kentucky. And if I took you down there and I showed you these smelters that I found, would you go home believing me or the geologists? Do people go into remote countries and build smelters for nothing? course not. You don't build the smelters till you actually find something to smelt. Now, Swift's going to call them furnaces as we go through the journal. So he says, much progress was made during the summer in the development of the mines. A large force was left to work the mines during the winter. Okay, so that really gives us a scope of what's going on. We know there's quite a few people. And these mines, there was enough silver and enough work to keep them busy, not just during the summer and then, get out before winter and go home, but they stayed and they worked all winter. And I'm going to show you the cave that the miners lived in. I found the cave, and it has treasure maps carved on the wall, and we're going to look at those too. Sadly, those treasure maps have been defaced by vandals, but I got pictures of them before that happened. Anyway, okay, so Montgomery, Jefferson, Mundy, and myself started out for home October the 25th, 1761, returning over the same way we came out. So it appears that Mundy, who'd been left behind, at some point joined them that year. Swift doesn't tell us exactly where. So they started for home on October the 25th, be late fall, or right in the middle of fall, 1761, returning over the same way we came out. On the evening of the 20th of October, our scouts discovered 6 savages. By altering our course, we avoided them. On October the 30th, we were pursued by savages, but we escaped from them again. Now, I find that interesting because they were coming out with their first silver on the pack train. How could a loaded down pack train escape pursuing savages? The savages maybe they were on foot, and the pack train was on, of course, the men were mounted. Perhaps that's part of the reason, but that's interesting how he doesn't elaborate on how they escaped the savages, but I am curious about it. And we saw no more of them until November the 9th, so roughly 10 days passed, October having 31 days, when they fired on us and they shot a hole in our lading, which enlarged and spilled the silver, which we had to conceal. This is what I'm calling Swift Cache number 1. They hadn't planned to conceal it. They had to do something with it because the container, whether it was leather, cloth, whatever, probably couldn't have been very thick leather. If the hole enlarged, it tore due to the weight. By the way, a pack animal could carry 200 pounds of silver or gold, just roughly around 200 pounds. But I will tell you, Swift reveals later in this journal that they did use horses rather than mules to haul out the silver that had been cast into coins, because a horse could haul at least 200 pounds or more, depending on its size and breed. That meant each carried approximately 2,400 coins, 1,200 on each side. So with one saddlebag unusable, the load could not be balanced. Thus, all 2,400 coins had to be hidden. Now you see, that's how you work things out from clues. All we are told that he shot a hole in our lading and spilled the silver, which we had to conceal. Doesn't say how much, does it? I just told you how much. based on research I did, you see, about how many pounds they could carry, and then using my head and thinking about the fact that they had two saddlebags, one on each side. They had to be balanced in weight, otherwise it could cause a mule to step off the edge of a narrow rock ledge or cliff or something, stumble and fall. Not a mule or a horse. I mean, you don't want an unbalanced load. So even though there was one usable saddlebag, they couldn't take those because they couldn't balance the load with the other saddlebag, so damaged and useless. And with the Indian situation, they didn't have time to make another saddlebag, as it were. So we can pretty well assume that there were 2,400 crowns, 2,400 crowns hidden. Each one of those at today's prices. Of course, these are much rarer numismatically because they're related to Swift, if you could find them. But even at the raw price of silver, that would be 2,400 times $25. Silver is about 25 an ounce right now. So that's a lot of money. So he says, which we had to conceal, marking the location with a triangle and a large slanted rock at the mouth of a creek flowing generally north. We saw no more of them. We did not camp that night until we crossed the Big Kanawha. Okay, so they probably made, with the pack animals, about 15 miles a day. We did not camp that night until we crossed the Big Kanawha. So they kept going in the darkness. If you go to the Big Kanawha, you go back 15 miles, that'd be probably their total trip. So this cache took place somewhere along that trail at the mouth of a creek flowing generally north. See, so there's quite a few clues here on finding this location. Now, I certainly can't guarantee you that somebody hasn't already found it. Probably have, in fact. But you know what? If you're not experienced at tracking down clues on things like this, it would be a great challenge, and you would profit and benefit even if you find basically an empty cache site. Marking the location with a triangle on a large slanted rock. Imagine going and finding that rock. Could be done. This is what professional treasure hunters do. But we have to put the clues together. We have to think. This is why you almost virtually never ever see a professional treasure hunter, even in advanced age, and I'm talking about late 80s, pushing into 90. You seldom see a treasure hunter with Alzheimer's or dementia. At least I never did in 50 years. Because using your mind in a sense is like a muscle. And exercising it to put clues together, and track down and figure out distances, all the things we're talking about here, folks, it will keep you young mentally. I jokingly tell people I'm stuck somewhere around, early 40s. And I'm thinking, what am I doing in this 73-year-old body? But what I'm doing is trying to keep going in it. So, I want to share as much of this kind of thing with you as I can. It would be fantastic if part of the legacy I leave is that I created a few professional treasure hunters that actually went on to find some well-known big treasures. Because quite frankly, I'll let you know a secret, and old Dennis If you're out there, Dennis, if you're listening, I know you'd give me an amen on this. Folks, it is the thrill of tracking down a treasure like this, having to work clues, having to figure things out, making mistakes, finding out where you went wrong. Okay, that wasn't the right creek. So where is the right creek? See? Things like that. That is a really, really great experience in life. So even if you find an empty hole, I got there too late on 2 of his caches. I found the cache sites. I found the empty holes that contain the silver coins. So I didn't come home with any more zeros in my bank account, but I came home with an intense satisfaction at having been one of those few good enough to track down those cache sites. It gives you a sense of confidence that if I could do it on this one, I can do it on another treasure story that hasn't been found. So all of these experiences are profitable, and each one of them brings you that much closer to success. Now, I do want to give you one more clue on this. I have notes interspersed in the journal, and I want to read some of those to you. I didn't get a chance to read through the journal yet in advance, so I've forgotten some of the things I wrote in there. And what I wrote was, from these clues coupled with map study, I speculate that this cache could have been buried at the mouth of Beech, B-E-E-C-H, Beech Creek, where it enters the Big Sandy River near Devon, D-E-V-O-N, West Virginia. I have not looked for this one, and I don't know if the rock marking the spot and the cache are still there. Have to tell you that. But there is as close as I can get you. And just having that much information, do you realize what a head start that would give you if you wanted to look for this over just just hearing a reference to it and having to start from zero? See, we've already got you up to 35 miles an hour. Now you can increase your speed, so to speak. All right. So we arrived at the settlements without further conflict on December the 2nd, 1761. We found our vessels returned from the Spanish seas after profitable cruises, which gave us so much encouragement for this branch of our business that we bought 5 more vessels for this service to use the next year. Now, ships were expensive, and so here we have an indication that Swift had great wealth already at his disposal. England and Spain were at war, as I mentioned. When this was written, so Swift would not merely have been involved in normal trading business on the Spanish-controlled areas of the seas. These comments indicate that his ships were privateers preying on Spanish shipping with the British government's blessing. Privateer ships, as I mentioned, were small and fast, and they could outrun Spanish warships while easily able to overtake any heavily loaded and lightly armed merchant ship they encountered. The merchant captains were instructed to surrender rather than fight by their owners, as they reasoned it was better to lose a valuable cargo than to lose a more valuable ship that could make up the loss by success in future voyages. Okay, so we're going to operate on the likelihood, we'll call it, that Swift's uh, Sea Ventures, he had a fleet of privateer ships. Now, I don't think they operated as a fleet. They were spread out. But they would have constituted a fleet indeed, because he had several and then he bought 5 more. Now, if each one of those ships captured a rich merchant ship, do you realize how much wealth that would be? Well, it's going to come into play because his privateer ships didn't operate like for just one season or 1 year. They operated the whole time the Swift is mining silver. And his privateer ships and the not only silver coins but gold coins or gold bars that they would have captured will come into play in a very important way in this area where Swift's 6 mines are, even though they're so far from the ocean. Okay, he says, my company and I left Alexandria in the last week of March 1762. As in the previous trip, we went by way of Fort Pitt. A large pack train was taken this trip, and we arrived at the mines on May the 10th, 1762, without trouble except for 2 horses drowning in the Big Kanawha and a keg of spilled rum, which was a great loss to us in our position. At the mouths of Sandy Creek, again the Big Sandy River, we cast lots to see who would go to the different points and work the mines. We found that the men who had been left to work the mines during the winter had become dissatisfied and homesick. We got labor problems here. Although much work had been done. Now, what does he mean by much work? Well, obviously, much work means that a lot of silver had been mined and smelted. Now, I don't know. I don't think there's anything in the journal that says that Montgomery made 2 sets of dies for the British crowds. So I'm thinking the group in the less rich mines just made silver bars rather than try to make coins. I think those were all made in the area of the richest mines. Now we were alarmed by, jumped ahead here. Some of the workmen had sailed with me and were not used to the rough work of mining. They wanted to get back to the sea. Some others and myself set out for home on the first day of September, 1762. We were alarmed by savages and had a short fight on the 2nd of September. Okay, we were greatly pestered, but came through safely. We left a valuable prize and 2 horse loads of silver on the south side of the Big Gap, where we marked some trees with our names and curious marks. See, this is very interesting. We left a valuable prize and 2 horse loads of silver on the south side of the Big Gap. Now, the Big Gap was either Pound Gap or Cumberland Gap. And I think it was, I think it was Pound Gap. Curious marks. This is where we marked some trees with our names in curious marks. Curious marks were likely nautical symbols such as ship's anchor and or the Masonic square and compass, which I saw right below Jonh Swift's initials carved in a beech tree so big that I'm 6'1", and three of us, my size, probably could not have reached around it and connected hands. And it also confirmed for me what I found in the cave house where some of his miners lived. The tree had Jonh Swift's initials carved backwards, which was his trademark. So you wouldn't confuse JS with anybody else who had the initials of JS. And below that was a Masonic square and compass carved into the tree. Been there a long, long time, but you could still make it out. Okay. So the next thing he says in the journal is from there, in other words, where they left his cache, by what I think is Pound Gap. Oh, pardon me, I got an attack of the yawns here. Should take a drink of tea. Maybe that'll wake me up. Sorry if you hear that noise. That's my computer telling me I have a notification. From there, we went to Castle's Woods. Now, he's referring to a tavern and inn run by a man named Castleman. This guy was well known, and the place was well known. And today, the town of Castlewood, Virginia, takes its name from this guy. So Swift says, from there we went to Castle's Woods and then to Alexandria. So he gives you pretty good clues as to the routes they took. And he says, we arrived there October the 12th, 1762, where we stayed until spring. We found our shipping interests had prospered greatly, and we bought 3 more ships from the Scotch Company. Now, here again, see, this is where having a little knowledge of world history can be a benefit. How many people know that there's a famous shipbuilding area on the Clyde River near Glasgow, Scotland? Well, this is probably what he was referring to. They're having their ships built there. It would be very logical. You know, in fact, this area on the Clyde was the most famous shipbuilding area in the whole world at that time. And ships are still being built there today. So then Swift says, I and my men more than doubled the number of pack animals for this trip. More than doubled the number of pack animals for this trip. So they were expecting great things, weren't they? Okay, so we see Swift prospering in 2 ways. He's prospering greatly from his venture on the seas, as well as the mining operation. Remember, they doubled the pack animals, and each one of those pack animals could carry out 2,400 coins. But I can tell you by no means were they all loaded with bullion. I'll prove that to you as we go just a little farther. We left Alexandria on the 21st of April, 1763, and we crossed New River in West Virginia. I might mention he didn't know anything about West Virginia back then, since it didn't exist. We crossed the New River. Excuse me a second. Let's see. Lost my place here. Hang on a minute.
Hey,
Hey,
hey, Dorian,
Dorian? Yes.
are you gonna make it?
Yes, I am.
You sound like you're gonna pass out on us.
Actually, I'm not going to pass out. I seem to have a yawning spell every evening that lasts about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm fine. And
Mm.
that's what I'm going through. But it makes my eyes water, and it's hard for me to read my notes, so I have to stop and wipe my eyes. It is just part of what goes with old age.
Mm.
All right, so let's see here. Okay, so they crossed the New River and thence to the Holston River in Tennessee. Yeah, I've crossed the Holston. The freeway crosses the Holston River if you're down around Knoxville. Uh, and from there to a large gap in the mountains. And I'm almost sure, since we're in Tennessee, this is a Cumberland Gap. And here we set our course for the mines near the headwaters of Big Sandy, arriving there the 27th of May, 1763. So why this strange new route? They were trying to avoid a route that was having more and more problems with attacking hostile Indians. So he says much progress had been made at the mines. We remained until the 16th of September, when we set out for Alexandria, and we went through Castle's Woods again and stopped with Castleman for 3 days. We arrived at Alexandria the last day of October 1763. We always carried in supplies and took out silver bars and minted coins, which Montgomery made. This was a very successful year. In 1763, the mining operations were hindered by hostile Indians, and it was deemed unsafe to go out by way of Fort Pitt. We had now become more familiar with the trails, so we left Alexandria June the 7th, 1764, and went by the way of the New River, crossing at Ingalls Ferry and the Large Gap, reaching what we called our lower mines on the 11th day of July, 1764. This was not a successful year. We decided to abandon the route by way of Fort Pitt because of Indians. We left the mines on the 8th day of November, 1764, going out by way of the Big Gap and crossing the New River. Okay, let's see. My apologies here. We arrived at Mundy's house on the upper Yadkin River in North Carolina on the first day of December 1764. This was an easy trip for us as there was no threat from the Indians on this route. In 1765, we started to the mines from Mundy's house on the 14th of April. So we know Mundy had a house on the Yadkin River. We went by way of Ingalls Ferry on the New River, arriving at the mines the 12th day of May, 1765. So they left on the 14th day of April, and they arrived on the 12th day of May. Almost a month, so 4 weeks approximately, it took them to get from Alexandria, or from Mundy's house, excuse me, from the Yadkin to the mines. Now listen to this. This is where it starts to get really super interesting in terms of treasure. We had a profitable year and gathered into a great cave our immense store of precious metal, both the coined and the uncoined. In other words, the bullion, the bars. And hid them until we would, by the will of God, convey it from there to the trade of the seas. In other words, invest in more ships. And then he says, being unable to transport such a vast amount, that treasure will be in that cave for eternity. Now, if you're following along in the photographs, the supplemental photos, take another look at picture number 3, because that is the mouth and the opening to Wind Cave, which I am 100% convinced is the cave Swift is talking about here. And if you want to get an idea of the true size of the entrance, look at the next picture number 4, and you'll see the word author with an arrow. That's me. I pulled this picture out of one of my books. That's why it says author. You can see the vast opening behind you in the Wind Cave. Okay, now so now we know, and Swift, what Swift does is he's giving us an overview actually, and then we're going to go back and he's going to fill in a lot of details about this overview, about the things that we read in different caches. And he's going to talk about other caches. He hid a lot of caches. So it's not just a matter of there's 4 mines or 6 mines. So he says, our geological knowledge was increased with each trip. In going from the mines this year, we went out through a gap at the headwaters of Big Sandy Creek. We arrived at Mundy's house on the 20th of November, 1765. It was on this trip home that we decided to take out a sizable amount of minted coins. We each had a horse load that was divided evenly among us. On the 6th of June, 1766, we left for the mines. Our delay was caused by the wounds inflicted upon each other of 2 of our company, Fletcher and Flint. They had been drinking heavily on Christmas Day, 1765, and came to blows with swords. Before fighting, they made their wills and concealed their money in the vicinity of Monday's house on the upper Yadkin. I've never looked for this. I do not know if the house is still there or if the money is still there. He says Flint buried 240,000 English crowns and Fletcher hid 360,000. Now, I think there's too many zeros in those figures. Here's why. The tremendous bulk and weight of that many 1-ounce coins would be the problem. 200, now listen to this, are you ready? 240,000 of these coins would weigh 16 tons. 360,000 coins would weigh 15 tons. No, wait a minute. I made a mistake. 240,000 of these coins would weigh 10 tons. My problem, or my mistake. Uh, 360,000 coins would weigh 15 tons. So it would have taken 250 horses at a minimum to haul all that silver out of Kentucky. Swift says they each had a horse load. Let's see. And I do believe that Swift's journal was miscopied at this point, either deliberately or accidentally, and that it's much more likely that the number of coins hidden was respectively 2,400 and 3,600. All right, wake up there, buddy. Let's see. Okay. I think that Fletcher probably had more coins because he'd won them gambling with the others in his party. I'm sure there was some of that going on after they arrived at Mundy's house. And there's no telling what's buried around Mundy's house besides these caches. Anyway, uh, even then, they would have weighed 200 pounds and 300 pounds, and that's a lot of silver. I remember pricing that silver at what was then the price of silver was $16 an ounce, and it came out to 96,000. So today it would be well over at $25 an ounce would be, well, that would add to 40% more to the value. So 40%, about $140,000, $150,000 in silver alone, not counting how rare the coins are. Like I said, if this house could be found, and it may very well have, be able to be found, I don't know what it was built out of, but I do know it would have been a substantial house because they had no shortage of money. It wasn't some simple little log cabin. This was probably more the size of a plantation house or something on the Yadkin. So very possibly could have been standing or burned during the Civil War. You'd have to do a lot of research and see if you can find, any records down there on Mundy, any land records, whatever, that might still survive. I've just never worked this one. So there you go. All right. During this fight now, he says that both men were badly wounded. Fletcher died on the second day of January. Flint finally recovered but could not make the trip in 1766. Where's Fletcher's coins? They buried them secretly. So you see, there's a cache. And wherever Mundy's house was. So he said, this year, the company was troubled with a mutiny of workmen who left and returned to the settlements, and it was with great difficulty that we obtained other workmen that could be sworn to secrecy concerning the indication of the mines. See this detail and the candid way he tells you about their troubles and problems? Indians, mutinies, men dissatisfied because they were sailors, not really miners. All of that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. So he says the others. Oh, he said it was great. It was with great difficulty that we obtained other workmen that could be sworn to secrecy concerning the location of the mines. All right, now, why was it difficult? How would you judge whether a man could be sworn to secrecy? Think about it. If you had to pick men that could be sworn to secrecy, how would you do it? They picked brother Masons. Swift was a Mason. So they had to find brother Masons because if they took an oath, when a Mason took an oath to a Mason, they did it more or less under penalty of death for violating the oath, you see. So that was the best bet for secrecy. He says, the others and myself took every precaution to conceal our mining operations. All right, this is a big statement. It's a short sentence, but it is a big statement in reference to this project. That tells us that we're going to have to find mines that have been deliberately concealed. And it's interesting because sometimes you don't conceal the opening to the mine, you conceal a side tunnel where your workings are. You stone up that entrance and you plaster it over and make it look like the surrounding rock. And Swift had men apparently skilled in doing that. He says, we left the mines on the 6th of November for Mundy's house, arriving on the Yadkin the 16th of December. They left the 6th of November and didn't get to the Yadkin until the 16th. So it took them over a month this time, well over a month. A month and 10 days. The company left North Carolina the first day of October, 1767, taking out the largest pack train up to that time. And our reason for spending so much time away from the mines this year was in obtaining supplies for such a large pack train and trying to keep our departure a secret. By now, several others, not of our company, had become suspicious of our activities. After a successful year, we went out by the way of Sandy Creek at Fort Pitt, arriving in Alexandria April the 1st, 1768, meeting with nothing material on the way. In other words, no problems. We left Alexandria on the 4th day of June, 1768, arriving at the mines on the 11th day of July, 1768. Again, a little over a month. This was a very successful year, but the Indians were very troublesome. Some of my companions and myself left the mines on October 26th. We were ambushed by Indians on the Big Sandy. Campbell was killed. Hazlitt and Staley were badly wounded. We arrived at Mundy's house on December the 14th, 1768. On December the 24th, Hazlitt died of his wounds. And don't you know, he probably had silver cached around the house too. Because Mundy's house seems to have been the headquarters for them. The 2 horses that were stolen by the Indians during the fight were a great loss to us, as we were compelled to conceal and leave their ladings at the mouth of a large creek running generally east. We left marks on a beech tree so we could locate it on our return. And this is Swift cache number 4. In January of 1769, we had to make a settlement with the Scotch Company. The settlement was not easily effected, as the company, seeing that we had prospered in all our enterprises, both at sea and on the land, took advantage of the nature of our business to extract from us a great sum, not their due. And this we paid, though very unwillingly, but fearing that worse might come from our refusal to come to this agreement wrongfully exacted of us. In making that settlement, we cleared our business with that company, deeming it imprudent to deal with them any longer. This company left Mundy's house on the 6th of May, 1769, and went by way of Ingles Ferry on the New River and through the Big Gap, arriving at the mines June 24th, 1769. The pack train was large and the progress was slow. Due to Indian troubles and the fears of some of the company, it was determined that we should close up the affairs of the company and quit the operations. All the workmen were pledged to secrecy and paid sevenfold of their agreed wages, 7 times. Excuse me. Let's see. Read ahead just a moment. All right, this is the important paragraph. Pay attention now. It came to us to settle what was to be done, and seeing that we had prospered beyond all our expectations and had gathered, now listen to this, gold and silver. Well, they didn't find gold in Kentucky. They definitely found very rich silver, richer than the Comstock lode, the famous Comstock lode in Nevada. This is very likely the richest silver strike ever made in the United States. But they had gold. And the gold had to come from what they were doing on the seas, the capturing of Spanish merchant ships. So we gathered gold and silver until we had heaped up great riches, and seeing also that the stormy life we had led in this wild land for almost a tenth of a century was wearing away our strength, and being minded that the works of men, or man rather, are always unfinished and unsatisfactory, leaving the heart at unrest and in turmoil, or tumult rather, and 2, being fully persuaded that the life of man should be at some time, or at some period rather, turned about for reflection on God, and his mind drawn in from the wanderings of this world, we decided to abandon this hard life for the present, returning here later to carry out the stores now hidden in the great cavern of the Shawnees. Again, this was cache site number 2, Wind Cave, as I've already told you, which fact was known to no living soul beyond our company. On September the 1st, 1769, we left between $22,000 and $30,000 in English crowns on a large creek running near a south course. This is Swift cache number 5, and I can tell you definitively this is South Fork Creek, in Jackson County, Kentucky. This was the cache site that I found. Too late. Someone had beaten me to it. There was only the one hole dug near the tree with Swift's initials and the square, Masonic square and compass, and there were some other symbols on the tree. So that would have been quite a find. Anyway, that was one of the two cache sites. That was the first one I found. Took me over 20 years to find it, and I was probably 2 to 3 years too late. Somebody had gotten to it first, and I think I know who got to it first, and I'll be talking about that individual later in the series. Close by the creek, we marked our names, Swift, Jefferson, Mundy, and other names, on a large beech tree with the symbols of a compass, trowel, and square. And that's what I found. I found that beech tree, and I found the symbols of the compass, trowel, and square. Okay, so now he says about 20 or 30 poles from the creek, a pole being 16 and a half feet, by the way. 30 poles is approximately 135 yards. Remember, 100 yards is a football field. So this would be approximately 1 1/3 football field lengths. About 20 or 30 poles from the creek stands a small rock. Between the small rock and the creek, you will find a small rock of bluish color with 3 chips made with a gritstone by rubbing it on the rock. By the side of this bluish rock, you will find a valuable prize. We left prizes here at 3 different times. So this is Swift cache 6, 7, and 8, all wrapped up in one hole. And he says at no great distance from this place, we left 15,000 of the same kind of crowns, marking 3 or 4 of the trees with marks. This is Swift cache number 9. So you see what I mean? This is not one treasure or one mine. This is awesomely a huge treasure. And remember, all these caches, smaller caches, are in addition. Each one of them is a major treasure, and yet they are dwarfed by the vast amount of gold and silver that's hidden in that cave of the Great Shawnees. Think about this, folks. Think about 22,000 silver British crowns the next time you dig a clad Washington quarter. Yeah, can you imagine? So not far from these trees, we left a prize near a forked white oak, about 3 feet underground. Even tells you how deep they buried it. We laid 2 long stones across it, marking several stones close about it with marks of animal tracks and arrows. And the animal tracks, by the way, are believed to be turkey tracks. 3 toes, with one 3 toes pointing forward, 1 backwards. So this is Swift cache number 10. Then he says at the forks of the Big Sandy, near its headwaters, is a small rock house. Now, a rock house is more commonly today in Kentucky called a rock shelter. It's a place where the cliff sticks out far enough that you can get back under the cliff to get out of the rain, and it'll provide you a space where you can build a fire and stay warm in the winter. And it's easy to tell if a rock house has been used by looking at the ceiling of it and seeing if there's old traces of old black soot on the ceiling. So at the Forks of the Big Sandy is a small rock house on a small branch. We hit a prize underground. It was valued at $6,000. Okay, let's see. Okay, here we go. Forks of the Big Sandy near Headwater, Small Rock. Okay, this is Swift Cache number 11. And let's see. We're at 9:30. We likewise left $3,000 buried in the rock house we camped in on the right-hand side. Well, there's Swift Cache number 12. I went by the place where we hid the 2 horse loads of silver and the valuable prize, and I'm not sure what he's talking about. Is the horse loads of silver, is one of them represent bullion and one coin? Never been able to definitively define what he meant exactly by valuable prize. But anyway, this is Swift Cache number 13. And he says that we found things as we had left them in 1763 and 1768. So Swift's telling us that 6 years later, in 1768, he left another cache of coins at the same location where they had buried the 2 horse loads of silver in 1762. And he says, this was the last trip to the mines I made, this was my last trip to the mines. I had made 3 other trips to the mines that I kept no record of, except to mark several trees and large rocks with peculiar marks for directions. I think these trips were probably when he was bringing gold coins, because he did not bring them from Mundy's house, probably, but probably they came in through Alexandria, Virginia. So obviously he kept no records for a reason. Now we've come to part 2 of the Journal of Jonathan Swift. Wanted to show you a couple of things first. If we look at in the supplemental photos, picture number, there we go, picture number 5, you see a bird carved on a beech tree that I found. And I'm pointing to the beak, the eye, and the tail. It was actually much clearer than the picture shows. And it was the tail that pointed towards the mines, not the beak, by the way. Now, if you look at the picture on the right, or the photo on the right, Swift said in his journal, the hills and watercourses are covered with laurel, interwoven like wire, so much so that it is nearly impossible to get horses to the furnace. We rarely took our horses nearer than 6 or 7 miles to the place. The country is mostly cliffy and rough. And listen, that hasn't changed much. There is an example of a picture I took with one of the fellows that was working it with me at the time. I've got him in the picture. You can see we're going uphill here near one of the mines. Look how rugged that is. You know, Mike, I'd like to organize a Swift tour. rent maybe a 15 passenger van or something and take a whole group down to Swift Country for a day. Uh, I, I, I probably my knees wouldn't hold up for going down in the canyons, but I can show you a lot. I can show you some of the rock markers and we could probably get up to the the cave house where the miners live that I'm going to show you later. All right, let's go.
Yeah. No, Mama, but I've got it on mute.
No, you don't. You're not on mute.
You don't know that, woman.
Mike, can you hear me? Mike, Mike, you're talking on a live mic. It just went out over the air. Okay. Yeah, I thought you might want to do that. Oh, what am I going to do with you and Dennis? Oh, good.
Because everything's muted. I don't think they could hear me. I think you were able to hear me. Geesh, I hope so. Yikes. My bad.
All right, well, let's continue bravely on here. Um, okay. All right, let's go to picture number 6. This is in my possession to this day. This was given to me by uh, the Abner brothers, which I'll be talking about a little later on. They found this near their home. They live in Swift Country, as we call it. And you can see this is a piece of silver spillage. Something was being poured, silver was being poured into a mold. This spilled over the edge, and you can see on the bottom of it the imprints of the debris on the ground that it landed on. And then the top is smooth because obviously there wasn't any debris on top of it. And a piece of it, they had a piece cut off for analysis. But I have that piece sitting about 20 feet from where I am right now. So next, when you on your visit there, Mike, you and Gypsy get to see this. All right, now let's go to picture number 7. This was the absolute very first clue confirming that I was getting into the right area for Swift's mines. I found this smelter, and it was amazingly just right off. This is picture number 7. It's just right off the road. There was a sharp curve on a mountain road, and right where the sharpest part of the curve was, there was a little creek that came down between two hills, and this was right beside that little creek. This is a smelter. I was a lot younger then. Okay, I'll get back into my notes here as soon as I get them back up on the screen. All right, so part 2. This is a description of the mines and the country. Swift says, the furnace I built is on the left-hand side of a long rocky branch that heads southwest and flows northeast. Now, when he said that heads, it doesn't mean it goes in that direction like I'm heading for the store. It means it begins in the southwest and flows to the northeast in a very remote place in the west. And I now know that this is Kavanaugh Creek. You will find it on the Layton Kentucky quadrangle map from the National Geological Survey. The National Geological Survey map called the Layton, Kentucky quadrangle. And there's you will find Kavanaugh Creek. Then he says, there is a very large rock house that faces the east. See how he gives such great details? This really makes it possible to find these things. There's a very large rock house. Number one, there's a clue. Number two, it faces the east. Number three, 100 yards above the rock house the furnace is in. Number four, you can stand at the furnace and facing the east, you can see two monument rocks, one 25 feet high and one 15 feet high. Now, I have not seen those rocks. I'm not sure that they are still standing. They may have come down off the hills during the huge, massive 1811 earthquake that hit this area. He says Furnace Creek forks about 3 miles below the furnace, and the left-hand fork is the furnace fork. Below the forks, the creek is a large stream of water flowing generally in a northeast direction. This is the South Fork of Station Camp Creek. There is a holly thicket a quarter mile below the furnace and a small lick above. What's a small lick? It's a place where the deer and animals could come to lick salt. There was salt seeping out of, a lot of times, the shale or the rock. If you were to go, in fact, Mike, the next time you come to my place, about 3 miles before you turn on my road, you'll come through a cut in the hills. The road goes right through a cut, and it's actually called Heron Hill, Herron. My wife and I call it Painted Rocks Pass because of all the colors in those sandstone cliffs, and one of them is brilliant white. You will see brilliant gold, brilliant black, red, and then you'll see these streaks of white mixed in, and that is salt seeping out of that sandstone rock. So in that case, it was revealed by the state cutting the road through there, making a pass. But that's the kind of salt that you can see the way the salt seeps out, that it would have been that way at the creek. So there was a small lick, a small salt lick, if you please. Now let's see, where was I? Okay, between the small salt lick and the furnace are two remarkable rocks. One hangs over the branch. The other rock comes up from the opposite side and leans against it, and the water runs under them. I think these rocks fell into the creek during the earthquake. I've not been able to find them. I found the area where they have to be related to other landmarks. For example, if you have 5 landmarks you're looking for and you can find 3 or 4 of them, a lot of times that will help you determine exactly where the missing one is or was. There's also a large buffalo salt lick 2 miles north of the small lick on another branch we called Lick Creek. I think possibly, and I won't say with 100% confidence, but very possibly this is Hopper Cave Branch. Hopper Cave Branch. Furnace Creek forks about 3 miles above the lick, and in the forks, at the foot of the hill, you will find 3 white oaks growing from the same stump. On each of them is cut a small notch with a tomahawk. We sometimes went to a salt spring up the right-hand fork and came back this way. which was the reason for our marking the trees. Most of the mountains have but little timber and are poor and barren. North of the furnace, about 3 miles, is a large hill, 7 or 8 miles long, on which there is good timber of different kinds, where we were able to make charcoal in large quantities for our use in smelting the ore. South of the furnace, there is little timber worth notice. Okay, the creek the mine is on, and when he says mine, because we know there's more than one, he's referring here to the great cave of the Shawnees, the treasure cave, Wind Cave, because it contains both the fourth mine of what he called the upper mines and is the depository for the vast store of both gold and silver riches that he and his men hid there. And that in addition to the great quantity of both silver bullion and English crowns that they weren't able to get out, to take out of Kentucky. And the creek he's referring to is the one that runs down the hollow directly in front of Wind Cave. It's called Wind Cave Branch. So he says the creek the mine is on heads southwest, begins southwest, and runs northeast. And that is absolutely correct on Wind Cave Branch. Excuse me. We found all of his directions accurate, no deceptions. And where the ore is, the cliff is in the shape of a half moon. Now, again, go right back up and look at photo number 3. You can't tell it very well, but you can see, if you look closely, there's a huge cliff there. And that is the Half Moon Cliff. And again, if you look at picture number 4, I'll remind you, all those pile of rocks, giant rocks you're seeing in the picture, all fell out of the ceiling of the Half Moon Cliff. It is a huge cave house, if you please, plus the entrance to a cave. And that's all I'm absolutely positive from the 1811 earthquake you're witnessing, looking at it in that picture. Okay, now in picture number 8. This is a place I haven't talked about yet. Let's see. I'll tell you what, let's hold off on picture number 8. And let me go a little farther in the notes first. And then we'll come back to picture number 8. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to go back and read it again. The cliff is in the shape of a half moon or half of a half moon. We call it the Half Moon Cliff. The vein of ore runs northeast and southwest. There are 2 veins, one thick and one thin. The richest ore is to be found in a latitude of 37 degrees, 56 minutes north. The ore vein of little value is in latitude of 38 degrees, 2 minutes north. Now, in the second part of this sentence, he might be referring to what he called his lower mines, which did not have the best ore. And he says, by astronomical observations and calculations, we found both veins to be just a little west of the longitude of 83 degrees, and the hills and watercourses are covered with laurel interwoven like wire, so much so. And I already read that to you a while ago as an excerpt. It's nearly impossible to get horses to the furnace, so we rarely took our horses nearer than 6 or 7 miles of the place. And the country is mostly cliffy and rough, and I can verify that beyond any shadow of a doubt. It is awesome. Uh, it is a worthy trip just to go walk that area and walk these giant cliffs that tower over your head. Uh, and you'll see everything you can imagine. You're not allowed to pick up any Indian artifacts because it's the Daniel Boone National Forest, but you will see flint. You'll see places where the Indians camped under those cliffs. You know, if you were allowed to dig and sift, you would find a lot of Indian artifacts. Anyway, Swift goes back. This is a flashback. He says his first trip, the first trip we made, Monday got lost. We put our horses on a river, the name of which was unknown to us. We put them in a place surrounded by cliffs on 3 sides and fastened the entrance with grapevines. So a natural corral, if you please. Then we crossed to the other side of the river and wandered around all day. That night, we came back to the place we started from. Bundy said that if he could find the Indian trace, which was the same 7 miles below, then he would know how to get to the mines. No, I'm sorry, which was some miles below, not 7 miles below. Okay, well, the Indian trace is known today on the frontier, or was on the frontier, as the Warrior's Path. So he says the next morning we went down the creek 2 or 3 miles in a westerly direction. Then we crossed over a natural rock bridge and struck the Indian trace. That is the Warrior's Path. The Warrior's Path comes through the area where I am sitting right now. It's a few miles to the west of me. Let's see here. Okay. Bundy, the Frenchman, led us to a place where the Indians, he called Meccas, and again, these are the Shawnees, had used as a campground. And we then went down a rocky branch. Bundy said, I see the myrtle thicket. I know the way from here. We went down a flight of Indian stair steps at the top of the cliff and crossed the creek. And that creek they crossed is Ash Ground Branch. Ash Ground Branch. And they climbed up to between the second and third ledge, and climbed up between the second and third ledge, then went about 200 yards west and found the opening to one of the mines. This mine is in red sandstone. This is the richest mine. The sandstone is actually kind of a deep pink color. It's not like a scarlet red. I can go down to my creek here and I can pick up sandstone rocks that are almost scarlet red. But in this case, I've seen this sandstone and it is not, it's more of a pink sandstone. Okay, the French people worked mines to the south of us. They had 2 furnaces or 2 smelters on a creek running a northeast course into a large stream that flowed generally west. This is War Fork. He's talking about War Fork, like going to war. All right. We visited them several times, but they were very jealous of us because we were English and of our successful mining activities. Now, I haven't looked for the French mines. I know about where they are on War Fork, but I have not actually tried to locate them. I may have found 2 of them accidentally. Like I said, I didn't find them by specifically looking for them. But one I found on War Fork, it's near where Wind Cave Branch flows into it, and another is in the hill directly across from, or south of Wind Cave. If you took the trees out between the 2 of them, you could see You can see the entrance to Wind Cave from this cave and vice versa. Across the creek from the rock house we camped in, the land rises high up to a cliff that stands back from the creek. The rock house we lived in faces the east, where the creek makes a turn to the south. A small branch comes into Furnace Creek from the southeast, just below our rock house. How to find this west mine. This is mine number 1. Set the compass on the west side of the rock house the furnace is in. Go due south 50 poles. Remember, a pole was 16 and 1/2 feet, which will bring you to the mouth of a small drain. Go to the head of this drain, and on the right, a drain is it's a gully. You know, it drains water when it rains, but it doesn't have water in it when it's not raining. Go to the mouth of a small drain and go to the head of this drain. On the right, you will find the mine. The ore is in gray sandstone with a long ridge running to your right. Near the center of the ridge is a huge rock that seems ready to fall. We called it balanced rock. Okay. Sorry there. We're about to wrap it up. 4 minutes. And I was trying to doze off on you there. You just have
Oh
to put up with
no!
it.
Oh no!
You just have to put up with it or fire me, one or the other. Okay, let's see here. Um, okay. Hang on. Thing scrolled on me when I didn't tell it to. Let me get my place back. Okay, how to find the middle mine. Oh, no, wait. We're still on the west mine. Uh, Go to the head of the drain. On the right, you will find the mine. The ore is in gray sandstone with a long ridge running to your right. Man, these are a lot of wonderful clues, guys. They really are. This is a very, very impressive journal that Swift left. Very much so. Near the center of the ridge is a huge rock that seems ready to fall. We called it balanced rock. We covered this mine up with locust poles, rock, and dirt, hiding all trace of our work. See, there you go about concealing the mines. That tells you how they did it. Locust poles. Locust is used for fence posts because it takes forever to rot. It lasts and lasts and lasts. So they slanted locust poles over the entrance, I'm sure, and then they piled up rock and dirt on top of them until you couldn't see the poles, and it just looked like, a little bit of a landslide or something. All right. How to find the middle mine. Got just about enough time to finish this. Go up over the furnace and take a southwest course until you come to a hanging rock high up between it and a very large mountain. On the east side of the hanging rock, within 100 yards, you will find a line of rocks. Search carefully this line of rocks for the opening into the mine. We also covered the entrance to this mine opening with locust poles, rock, and dirt. And that completes part 1. We started 1, and I called this part 1B. So we will continue in part 2, and the topic will be right off the bat is how to find the richest mine. So Swift left just an amazing amount of clues. What do you think about this, Mike?
That's amazing. Oh,
Isn't it?
I'm on. Yep, I'm on. Yeah, it's incredible. All kind. Now, Bill said, too bad all this is in Daniel Boone National Forest. Is it all in there?
As far as I can tell, and I think that's deliberate on the part of the government, frankly. I will tell everybody this. Over the 50 years that I've examined treasure projects that I wanted to work, and I've had a lot of connections with other professional treasure hunters, uh, and we've all seen a pattern that so very, very many, a huge percentage, well over 80% of all the major treasures, in which there are documented stories for, like this one, they're all on federal property. It cannot be a coincidence. So while the public was thinking that our benevolent government was going around creating, Mike, all these national parks, they were locking up big pieces of land where they suspected that there was very valuable things to be found, either in terms of minerals like gold and silver to be mined or caches. So, what we found is that basically our biggest competition for the big treasures is usually the federal government. And I know they're going to deny this to high heaven if anybody heard this podcast, and they're going to laugh and say, this guy's, he's living in la la land. That's just not real. It doesn't happen. And if I was telling the truth and I'm right, what would you expect these people to do? Say, oh yeah, you got us. We thought nobody knew, but you knew and you told everybody, so we might as well fess up. Do you think they're going to do that? Does anybody think they would do it that way? No.
Right.
What they're going to do is discredit the speaker every time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, we have, we'll be using these same pictures next week. We're going to get into some. It gets more and more amazing, and I'm so glad I've got these pictures of the mines and the house the miners lived in, and the treasure maps and things to show you. I'll tell you what. Let's do. Let me give you a teaser before we sign off here. Let's go to picture number 16, everybody. Picture number 16. It's 4 pictures. And in the lower right corner, you'll see carvings left by Swift and his men. And I have chalked them in. You can see the carving on the lower left corner, what it looks like before I chalked. And now you can see them on the other side. And look at Jonh Swift's initials carved backwards, just like I told you. And do you see the anchor towards the bottom? Just to the right of center, barely. A ship's anchor, a nautical symbol. There isn't any doubt that this is the authentic Swift here. This was taken inside the house where the miners lived. Let's see. I'm going to show you one of the mines. I'm going to show you the tailings from the mine. The rock that there's always rock called tailings that come out of silver and gold mines. Look at picture 15 real quick. There is the entrance to the cave house that has these carvings on the walls in it, right there. And something very, very key, proving that this was a Swift site, was found right where the yellow arrow is pointing, because we have records that Mundy and 2 of the miners that were in the original company went back after Swift had gone blind and had failed to find any of the mines. They came back and one of the two miners was killed by Indians, and his body was found right there where that arrow is. He had the flat buttons, all the flat buttons of the period, everything were there. There wasn't any doubt. We know it was one of two men. And Mundy would also be wounded, and he would be far, far south of this site, down near McKee, Kentucky. There is a place in the creek called Mundy's Pool. And I talked to the local people, and the legend is that Mundy was wounded by the Indians, fell into that pool, and drowned. That was his fate. So we got a lot of stuff to cover, folks. The journal is just the beginning of the story. It really is. And we got some more important stuff to cover in the journal first, though, before we get into once the journal's done, then we'll get into the story of my searches over the 20, 30 years. So I want everybody to get a real taste of what it's like to hunt the big treasures. I hope I'm communicating that well to everybody. Because most of us are coin hunters, Civil War relic hunters and things. We're not really out there doing things like Jonh Swift, but there are people that, this is every bit, to me, Mike. This is every bit as good as Oak Island. Every bit as big. There's a lot more caches involved. Isn't it kind of amazing how many caches they hid?
Right.
And like I said, I've literally found two of the cache sites, and I have worked out where another cache site is, but I have not been back because it involves climbing a mountain, and I'm just not sure that I'm up to that.
Yeah, Dorian, let's wrap it up, man. I'm so sorry. I'm ready to pass out. I'm so tired. I am just exhausted, and yeah, we'll get back to it next week. I don't know if Dennis is back or if I'm doing it or if you're doing it solo or what's going on, but we'll get it all figured out.
Oh.
It hit me hard. I'll tell you, I was running around like a wild man and pacing and stuff until I got set down, and now I'm struggling. So,
well, did that brisket get done?
It's still on. I'm so mad at that stupid brisket. I don't know why it's taking so long. It should be done about now. I need to get out there and check it. So
nothing worse than an animal that refuses to be cooked.
Right, exactly. Just cook so I can eat you. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we'll see you back next Tuesday night.
Good night, everybody.